In this video, I create a custom Funko Pop of Pokémon Medali Gym Leader Larry. Hi there! So, you could say I enjoyed playing Pokémon Violet quite a bit. It had a great storyline and some awesome character designs. And then there was Larry. Poor Larry. Now, I'm not saying he isn't a great character, he totally is. He just isn't quite as colourful as everyone else in Paldea. But he is way more relatable as someone demotivated by a boring job, but with a cool hobby. Anyway, to make him, I started off with this Airman Pop, as he has a nice suit and a similar pose to Larry. However, the head is not suitable, so I also bought this Shazam Eugene Pop for that. So, before I do any painting or sculpting, I need to remove the head. To do this, I just pop the pop into a pot of hot water for a few minutes. And then the head will pop right off. Next, I need to sculpt the little quiffs of hair that Larry has sticking out. For this, I use something called Milliput. Milliput is a 2-part epoxy putty, which sets hard after a few hours. However, it can be quite brittle, and these bits of hair sticking out might break too easily. So, to counter this, I am mixing in a bit of green stuff. Green stuff is also a 2-part putty, but is much more flexible than Milliput, and takes longer to cure. To help the putty look like part of the hair and not just something I stuck on, I used this silicone blending tool. I have no idea what it's actually meant for, but it works great for sculpting. Oh, and then I decided I hated the positioning of those quiffs, so I took them off and started again. I also use a lot of water to smooth everything out, so that I wouldn't have to do any sanding later. As I had a bit of putty left over, I decided to make Larry's briefcase. After all the putty parts had finally cured, it was
time to prime!
For this, I use Vallejo Mecha Grey Primer. I start off with some light mist coats and build up in layers to the final wet coat. I then sprayed the face in Vallejo Flesh Tone. For the rest of the figure, I needed to go shopping for some grey paint. That should just about do it. For the suit, I airbrushed on some Game Air in neutral grey, but I really did not like it, so I went with this anthracite grey and sprayed over the neutral grey. I really like this grey much better. Next, I masked off the face and airbrushed the hair in black. I was super excited to paint those grey bits of hair, but just like before, I really did not like how it looked with the neutral grey colour, so I painted over that with the anthracite grey. I think it looks so much better. It no longer looks like some primer that I forgot to paint over. I messed up a little bit, but a wet cotton bud helped to remove my paint splodges. I also had to do some little touch-ups here and there. Next up, I hand painted the shirt in pale grey. When that was dry, I painted the tie in pale blue. Then I painted the neck and hands. Once the painting was done, I airbrushed over a coat of my favourite satin varnish. Next, I needed to recreate Larry's eyes. The Bulbapedia description of Larry says that he has square eyes with square grey pupils and rectangular eyebrows. So I made some eyes and eyebrow decals for Larry. I would say his eyes are more trapezoid than square, so that is how I designed them. I applied the decals with microset, which you actually can't see due to my terrible filming of that. Sorry. I did manage to get the next scene into shot, thankfully. So here I am applying microsol, which will make the decals form over the eyes. I really love how the part of the eyes that have not been covered by the decal looks like the circles under Larry's eyes. That was a happy little accident. Then I spent absolutely ages trying to get the eyebrows to be level. Now that is all done, I got back to the thing that Larry probably hates. His briefcase. I wonder what he keeps in there. To make the briefcase look like Larry's, I created a decal design in Affinity Designer. I printed out 2 different colour versions as I wasn't sure which one would look the best. I ended up going with the darker one. Again, I used some microset to apply the decal. I think it looks alright, but those sides look pretty awful. So I cut some strips of the leftover decals to go around the sides. Also, because I am a terrible perfectionist, I had to make the stitching lines meet up. Once I had finished that, it was time to get the head back on. I can't put the figure in hot water now, so I just slice away some of the vinyl around the top of the neck post. Then the head should go back on. You know those ribbons that you sometimes get around a clothing set? I keep all those, and I will be using this one to make the handles for Larry's briefcase. I cut off a small strip from the edges so that the fibres would not come off. But bits did keep coming off, so I decided to seal up the fabric by basically covering it in Mod Podge. It was super messy, but it did work. Once I worked out where the handles went, I used some super glue to stick them in place. Larry's tie has some pretty little clouds on it, but I wasn't sure I could paint those on. However, I knew it would annoy me forever if I didn't paint them on, so I gave it a go. It was so nerve-wracking. First, I painted these tiny white blobs. Then I filled them in with the same blue that I used on the tie. Ooh, didn't realise Larry's head was in the way there. Thanks, Larry. I gave the decals and the tie a blast of satin varnish, and then I had to get Larry to hold his briefcase. I had to cut through the nice loop I made on the handles, but it's fine. I needed to make one side longer than the other, so it would look like he is actually holding the briefcase. Then I used a cocktail stick to apply a tiny bit of super glue to the handles. This was so I wouldn't get glue anywhere else on the figure, but I did. So I just went over the shiny super glue with a little bit of my beloved satin varnish. Next, I have to make the box. To do this, I take a photo of the figure and remove the background in Affinity Photo. Then I create the box design in Affinity Designer with a template I found online. I increase the scale to 103%, then print out the designs onto some extra white presentation card, and then I laminate the sheets. I carefully cut out the laminated pieces. For the window, I use a craft knife and some small scissors to cut around the head part. Then I use a bone folder to make my folds nice and sharp. We don't like wasting things on this channel, so I reuse the plastic window from an unneeded box. But there's a lot of cardboard stuck to it, so I run the plastic under the hot tap for a bit. The cardboard will just rub off now. I use some double-sided sellotape to stick everything together. I reused the bubble from the Airman box. And then I put the box into these amazing protectors from Titan Shield. They come with a cover that is super satisfying to remove, and they fit perfectly. I am super happy with how this figure has turned out, and I'm so glad I painted on those little clouds. It is my favourite bit of the whole thing. And now, here's the final result.